Welcome everybody to this SCL Wellbeing webinar. Our goal with this session is to help you address any wellbeing issues that you might have. And in this session, we're going to focus on particularly some of the stuff that might be coming up in lockdown. And then we're going to take a deeper look at what underlying patterns and behaviours might be causing you to have a stressful response and how we might go about dealing with those. Please submit any questions that you've got using the Q&A function, and you can do this anonymously, or you can use the chat function if you want to share any resources like books, podcasts, anything that you've been finding helpful. That would be brilliant, so please feel free to do that. I'm Maddie Southern. I'm the Communications Manager for SCL, and I'm joined as ever by the creators of the SCL Weekly Wellbeing blog, Nick Watson and Gary Waters. Nick, who is really glamorously joining us from Portugal, which is just frankly showing off, is a legal tech entrepreneur, co-founder of Ruby Datum, and has a development background, a passion for well-being, and is working towards the vision of a more mindful legal industry. Gary is a personal development, business and mindset coach who works with people all over the world, helping them to shift their mindset and achieve personal fulfillment and business success. And he specialises in identifying the root cause of problems and works with his clients to dissolve them permanently. So we thought that January can be such a rough time for so many people, kind of a letdown after Christmas if you celebrate Christmas or have taken that sort of festive break. For those of us that live in the Western Hemisphere, it's the middle of winter. So, you know, the inclination is to hibernate, and yet it's the time that we tend to put so much pressure on ourselves to make lists of resolutions and be all we can be and achieve as much as possible. And actually not that much has changed since 2020 in so many ways, apart from a new president in the US, hooray. But we, you know, we're still in lockdown. Things can feel quite bleak. So let's start by Nick and Gary. How would you say somebody is feeling stressed, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling depressed? How do you spot those signs? How do you spot those signs of possible burnout? What steps can you take to look after yourself in that situation? And when would you say is a good time to actually look for more help, maybe professional help?
Right. Well, I'd say, first of all, you know, when I just hear what you just said, it kind of hurts my heart because, you know, it's the experience for most people, and everybody generally around the world is struggling in some kind of way. So in answer to your question, it can sound quite simple, but it's about really just checking in. And that's easier said than done because we're trying and running so fast, trying to get somewhere that we think we need to be in order to relax. And so we often just don't even take the time to stop, take a breath, and actually check in to see how we feel. Yeah, what was kind of screaming to me when you were talking was just like, breathe, you know, breathe. It sounds really simple, but just breathe. And so check in, you know, what's really going on right now? You know, for me personally, it's a great question. Yeah, one of the things I really coach is to ask better questions. So it really is about tuning in, you know, am I feeling anxious? Okay, so that means that I'm worried to an extreme degree. You know, why? You know, and also depression could be something, you know, okay, I'm really low to an extreme degree, and it's got a kind of foreverness linked to it because I can't escape it. So, you know, it would be to spot it within yourself. It's to be able to spot something, you've got to stop, because if you're running at light speed, you're going to miss it. Yeah, it's a bit like those guys who like make their cars absolutely incredible and then go 100 miles per hour down a 30. What's the point? You can't see the car, you know? So it kind of is a bit like stop, take a breath, check in, and just really feel into it. You know, what's really my reality right now? You add anything to that, Nick?
Yeah, sure. It's adding to what Gary said. It's if you recognize these emotions within yourself, rather than asking what should I do about it, it's important to say, what part of me is uncomfortable with this and why? And like really kind of start interrogating the emotion, not to fight it or change it or judge it, but just to recognize it and observe it. Maddie, you also mentioned like when is a good time to like seek professional help or just any help at all. And I think it's always the time. You know, whether it's just a friend or family member or just someone to talk to, as a way to externalize, it's always a good opportunity to ask for help. I mean, therapists themselves often have therapists, coaches have therapists. There's nothing wrong with asking for help at any point, and that time is always now.
Yeah, that's really beautifully said, Nick. And, you know, obviously I kind of left that one a little bit to you because I'm obviously clearly biased being a coach myself. But, you know, one thing I'd say for sure is that when I hit my lowest moment, I wouldn't have got out of it without having a complete change in thinking. And that wasn't something that I miraculously, you know, imagined up or pulled out of some kind of, you know, magical space. It was going and getting some help for, you know, a way out of what I couldn't see at the time. So with regards to, you know, any coach or mentor or even friend, you know, as a coach, I have a coach. Yeah, it's absolutely essential. I'm constantly looking for ways to what I describe as find more freedom. Yeah. So as Nick said, the perfect time is now. The challenge with that is that obviously we're conditioned to believe that going and speaking about this stuff or speaking with somebody is a sign of weakness, when actually I'd assert that it's actually a super sign of strength. So that kind of answers that beginning start to it. I know you kind of touched on, Maddie, that you said, you know, kind of tips and signs and things like that. But what I think me and Nick are truly committed to with these sessions, especially the in-person ones, to really dive a little bit deeper and get to the root cause of things. To really help raise the awareness for a lot of people who might be in this realm of trying to fix what they think is wrong with a behavior. Because that's the normal route. Something's wrong, therefore I must be doing something wrong, or I am wrong. Whereas I'd assert the actual liberation from that pattern is the awareness of what's truly going on. So I think that is where we'd obviously like to take this conversation today, but to remind everyone that we've put a lot of resources out on the Wellbeing blog, which does cover these, you know, tips or things that you can do to supplement the awareness. But fundamentally, the awareness has to come first. So I hope that made sense.
I always. Sorry, Maddie, go on.
I was just going to say there's a lot to sort of unpack there. So let me start with, why is it important that, so we've talked about tips and tricks and routines and things that you can do to perhaps lift a mood or change a mood or address a surface response, if you like, or a surface behavior. And we've also touched on the idea of being able to tolerate, if you like, a kind of a negative emotion or a low mood, that actually it's completely human. You're not supposed to feel happy all the time. That would be like being full all the time or asleep all the time. You know, you're meant to have a contrast of emotion. But why is it so important that we get to the layers below to maybe why these same behaviors keep coming up in similar situations?
Yeah, fantastic question. I love it. We're diving kind of straight into the deep end. Yeah, so, you know, the best way to describe this is perception and also awareness. So what do I kind of mean? So I kind of spoke to behavior. We try and, you know, fix things with behaviors, which I kind of put in the bracket of, let's say, tools. And the best analogy I heard about this was from a guy called Peter Crone, who I'd invite anybody to go check out. He's really very, very insightful. But he describes the difference between tools and awareness is that You know, not so long ago, we would look out to the water and think that, you know, the biggest fear was that was the end of the world. Yeah, if we went over the, you know, past the water, yeah, we might die. Yeah, big fear. So if you're in the realm of tools, then, you know, if you haven't developed the awareness to see that that isn't the end of the world, you might develop like a tool, like a watch that might beep if you got close to that spot. Yeah, that's in the realm of tools. However, if you were to go on a walk, if Maddie, you and I were to go for a walk, and Nick, we'll take Nick along, and we were to, you know, climb a mountain, and we just saw like, oh my gosh, the world doesn't end. You know, it goes on way further than that, from that higher level of perspective, yeah, that higher level of awareness. Then where's there the need for a tool? So therefore the awareness has to come first, because when that comes first, then you no longer need the tool to fight the fear. And that brings me back, without overrunning on the conversation, I'll definitely bring Nick in, is just, I said perception. So the only reason why you would perceive something to be something to worry about, something to be scared of, something to be sad about, is because your perception is making it mean what it means. Yeah, the outer event, it's just the event. It's just happening. It's devoid of meaning, because I can look upon an event and you can look upon an event and it can be exciting for you. Whereas for me, it could be, you know, really scary. So what that means is it's my perception that it's generating the thoughts and feelings that I'm therefore feeling. So in answer to why go down to the deep root cause, why am I perceiving it that way? And that's where the work is. And that's also where the freedom is.
I can't really add to that, Gary. It was beautifully put. Yeah, I think that was wonderful. I think I always use the analogy. It's like if you hit your leg on a rusty piece of metal and then you try putting a plaster over it, it's okay, it's going to stop the bleeding for a bit. But if it's an infected wound, it's going to keep coming back. So, you know, you need to use deeper tools to work with that. But if you were walking along and your mind wasn't in the future thinking about something, that a problem that doesn't exist, maybe you wouldn't have walked into that metal bar in the first place. And that's what it's like when it comes to the awareness. It's just about recognizing these things before and not letting your mind like wander in the past or the future, but being in the present moment.
Yeah, which is, you know, the biggest challenge of them all. I'll quite openly say the absolute master skill whenever I'm coaching someone or I'm doing workshops is self-observation and the power of presence. And the reason why that is the case is like what Nick just spoke to. If you're not present in the moment, you are lost within your mind. That is, you are lost in the past or the future, you're in your thoughts. And, you know, this is where a lot of anxiety comes from. Yeah, what's actually happening, people don't really like to hear this, but what you're actually afraid of, it's your own imagination. And, you know, liberation comes from really discovering the deeper levels that, you know, the suffering that we occur, the long-term suffering is always psychological. We can experience the temporary pain, like Nick said, you know, you scrape your leg or the nail in the leg. I think it was a bit more extreme, your example there, but it's like pain is temporary, it comes and it goes, but suffering we can make long-term because we have the ability to make an experience as real in our minds as, you know, an outer world experience. Yeah, the body doesn't know the difference between the two. It's totally objective. So if you're thinking about something that you're concerned about in the future, that is as a direct experience what's going to be happening in your physiology. So yeah, we're kind of straight into awareness, but that is a very important point, that Nick, for sure.
We've had a question, which I'll put to both of you. Are there any common symptoms of distress or anxiety, whatever, that you're seeing with lawyers in particular?
Well, I guess the answer to that is, it's an interesting question because it's assuming that stress is a different emotion based on an event. It's just to varying degrees. So the stress that we feel is as a direct effect of the importance that we're placing on the event. So it kind of goes back to what we're just talking about a little bit with regards to the awareness, is that if I am perceiving something to be in conflict to what I personally want or expect, then I'm going to feel a resistance. And that resistance is stress. So it's people dependent, aka like a case or something might not go to plan. It depends how important that case is with regards to the amount of stress that you're going to feel. But what we're talking about still is stress. Yeah, it's still, I'm in resistance to that event that's happening in circumstantial reality based on my opinion and my perception of what I think it should be. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think there's probably an argument to be made as well that lawyers are trained to spot the detail, you know, so their training, if you like, can sometimes enhance our brain's natural inclination to search for the negative. So I sometimes wonder if that can probably make it even more intense, because you're already kind of like, your brain will scan the landscape constantly for threats. And then as a lawyer, your training is to spot the details, spot the problem, spot the loophole in the contract, spot, you know, so you're kind of working with your brain's natural instinct to look for the negative. And I guess that's kind of, in business speak, that's, you're focusing on the problem, not the solution. And you want to look at the solution to that. And I guess there's a second part to that as well, is if part of your job is about the stress that you're feeling is perhaps because you're working certain hours, because you're in a particular situation that you feel you have very little control over, whether that's working or a life situation, how do you then manage that? If the awareness is painful, and I guess you'd say that, you know, it's painful because you're resisting it, but how would you kind of deal with that situation if it's a situation that you can't necessarily escape from?
I think,
Yeah.
sorry, go on, Gary.
Yeah, no, carry on that, go for it.
I think last year with, you know, COVID approaching, it's been our biggest teacher in this aspect. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of contracts that have been drafted to cater for all these possible situations. And then COVID comes along and no one had thought of it in many, many contracts, and people have been burned in all sorts of places, which just goes to show that we don't actually have control over every aspect of life. There's always going to be things that happen beyond our control. We think we should figure out how life should be and try to make it that way, but we can't accept that it's just perfect the way it is, and there's always going to be uncertainty. And no matter how much planning you do, you know, the more planning you do, often the more uncomfortable it is when it doesn't go to plan. So it's really important to almost kind of just recognize that we're on just this big rock hurtling through space, spinning around, and just enjoy what is, because we're not going to be here forever.
Yeah, I mean, that's very beautifully put, Nick. And, you know, I definitely agree, which can be very tricky, right? I totally get it. I totally can feel into it. You know, I deal with this on a daily basis. And that is an awareness that comes after time that's not always available when you're right in the midst of, you know, life feeling like it's happening to you, where there is no control. And just to bring a little bit of awareness into what's really happening, first and foremost, what Nick said, totally spot on. Life is uncertainty. And for our human brain, that is not good news, because it is designed, it has evolved over the eons of time to predict and protect. Yeah, that's how we are still here. So we, on our deepest level of code, we come into this world with zero knowledge, apart from these instincts to survive. So we have this brain that then picks up everything from, you know, parents to caregivers to anybody that's had an effect on us. Everything else is learned. So what I'm pointing towards here is that your brain is set up for survival. It's set up for control, and it's going to use its tools to try and control what I just said was an uncontrollable experience. And if you take anything from this phone call, you know, one key awareness, as unsatisfying as it sounds to the human mind, it is the truth, is that right now, the reason why you're experiencing resistance or stress to whatever is showing up, it is as a result of trying to control what is actually uncontrollable. And then what you get to the point of, okay, well, if that's what's happening, then it's clearly my perspective, it's my perception. And how can I shift that? Yeah, is it really true that my brain is right now predicting on its deepest level that I'm not going to make it? Yeah, we don't think that way because we're not conditioned. But is that really true? And then from that point, you can work your way back to discover, actually, you know, it's not life or death, even though it feels that way to our ego, maybe. You know, maybe somebody said blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, we're not going to get the promotion, whatever it is. It's really reconciling on the deepest fundamental level that your mind that is fixed in control is trying to control an uncontrollable experience. So with that comes a tremendous amount of humility, and me just basically saying, you know, hold a little bit of a space for yourself. You've learned to do this to survive, but my main role is really investigating those narratives that so many people hold and believe to be true, which just simply aren't.
We had a really interesting question, actually. This is lovely. What are the three of us doing personally that makes us feel like we're thriving and actually enjoying ourselves in a prolonged worldwide crisis? So let me start with you, Nick. Well, you're in Portugal, so I guess that helps a little.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got stuck here. I came out here a few months ago, and then there's all sorts of things put in place. Like, you know, I went to rent out my house and things like that. And then suddenly no one can move into the house. I had a lot of my income cut off. You know, my business was hit really hard by COVID. You know, we saw our turnover drop 90% this year. We're surviving, but, you know, it's in usual kind of human circumstances, I would say it can be stressful factors involved. But I'm kind of the understanding that life will be okay no matter what happens. You know, worst case scenario is I lose my house, I lose my business. Okay, I'm not going to lose the skills I have. You know, I've run a business now for 5 years. I've learned so much in those 5 years that if I was to do it again now, I'm pretty sure I can build a much more profitable business, like very, very fast. You know, I know a lot of people in the legal industry now. I'm not scared of failing, because if I ever did fail, I know I can like build myself back up again. So I feel like I'm taking comfort in that fact. And, you know, I'm applying a lot of the tips and tricks that we've put out there on the wellbeing, such as meditation. But the important one is to recognize when I feel certain emotions. You know, certain things can trigger a certain emotional response that has been conditioned into me from my entire life. And as soon as I recognize that, I say, hey, okay, why am I feeling this way? And why am I uncomfortable with this feeling? And from that, I keep asking questions. I keep saying, well, why has this triggered this uncomfortable feeling? You know, where does it come from? Like, and am I okay with the worst case scenario? Do I have a plan in place? You know, am I comfortable with things going wrong, as they'd say? So, you know, that's how I've come to be able to deal with it all.
How about you, Gary?
Yeah, you know, it's a beautiful question. I was just marveling in Nick's strategies and tactics and his awareness. But yeah, for me, it's really interesting, right? Because lockdown is, or this situation, that is what's happening. But it comes back to like your perception as to what does that mean for you. So I've obviously been blessed to have gone through quite a tough time roughly about 10 years ago, which facilitated this shift in thinking. So, you know, when it comes to lockdown, I make the joke that I was built for it. Yeah, because I've done the mindset work and the self work that really allows me to be okay with uncertainty. You know, it's not optimal, it's not ideal. You know, I love, you know, connection. I love to see my friends. I love, you know, to see my, you know, close family and things like that. So there's definitely things in ways that we've been challenged. So for me personally, you know, depends if it's like what you do on a daily basis, you know, which kind of comes back to, well, I make sure that I am as present as possible to really see what's going on, and not watching the news, for example. That's not what I mean, but as in what's going on in my world. And Nick alluded to that, you know, how do I feel? But to be honest with you, my main secret sauce that gets me out of any kind of challenge is gratitude. And that can sound a little bit light and fluffy. And, you know, when I came across it, as, you know, it was very much overplayed. It was very much, you know, oh, make a gratitude list and, you know, be grateful. And, you know, we go, well, I already am grateful, because, you know, who doesn't want to be a grateful person? Nobody. So, you know, for me, what I truly discovered, though, is that it wasn't light or fluffy. It's actually incredibly profound. To the point where if you can ask yourself, and I said at the start, a better question when you're in the heat of the moment of, let's say, an emotional overwhelm, then if you can ask yourself the question, what can I actually be grateful for right now in this moment? Rather than, if you check in and you do observe your mind, remember it's in predict and protect. So it's going, what's wrong with this? You know, what are the implications for me, my family, you know, my finances? Will I lose my job? You know, blah, 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 blah. And it's searching. If you hear the noise of that kind of conversation, which is all it is, but it's a conversation, it is seeking safety at the end of those questions. But the reason we stress and we get so anxious is because we don't know. Yeah, they are future based. They, again, you're lost in your mind of, you know, past hurt is informing future fear. So it's kind of, if you can become aware, and this is what I do, if I become aware that I'm emotionally, you know, triggered by something, I mean, first of all, I get super excited by that, because that means I get to find more freedom. But if I do, and it, you know, grabs me, then I make sure to check in and I watch the narrative in my mind. You know, what kind of questions is it asking? Because from that standpoint, I can ask myself a better question. If I'm not present in the moment when observing my mind, then I'm lost in it. So you kind of already effed, you know, not going to drop the F-bomb on that, but you know what I mean. So if you can ask yourself a better question and say, you know, what can I be grateful for right now in this moment? Because questions direct our focus. So whatever you focus on, you can shift that by asking a better question. So what can I be grateful for? Well, the instant response might be, well, there's nothing to be grateful for, really. Is that really true? You know, how about the fact that you're breathing right now? Yeah, I know plenty of parents that would give their life savings for their child to breathe unassisted for like 10 minutes or 10 seconds. You know, can you see? Yeah, do you have some food in the fridge? Yeah, it's really basic. But for me, that enables me to check in and put things into perspective. Yeah, from that place, I've totally shifted. And if I truly get into like a true state of feeling grateful, not just thinking gratitude and grateful thoughts, feeling it. It is a human impossibility, and I promise you this, to feel negative whilst you're in a positive, grateful state. I have not met one human being who authentically gets into that state that can therefore feel down, because it is one of the highest frequency emotions that we can measure. Now, I've gone on a tangent, but I really want to overlay that. So what do? I do that if it's challenging. Otherwise, I do a lot of other things. I, invest in my mind, body, soul. So I work out, I train. Yeah, I remind myself of everything that I'm learning, because repetition ingrains it. And from that standpoint, I'm good to go. Yeah, it doesn't mean I don't get challenges. Yeah, I probably get, some really big challenges in comparison to a lot of people, but it's my perspective and how I view that as an opportunity for learning and growth, rather than let it take me down, because both are available. It just depends what you want to focus on. How about you, Maddie?
Yeah, I was just thinking what you said last. It's like that, I don't know if it's actually a fable or just a saying, but the good wolf and the bad wolf. There's a grandparent talking to their grandchild, and saying, there was a good wolf and there was a bad wolf, and the grandchild asks, well, which one? And they were having a fight. Which one survives? The one that you feed. So the idea that you can. It sounds a little flippant to say, well, you can just generate positive emotion, but I think, for me, when I suddenly kind of it clicked that I always had a choice to think something differently, to choose how to respond to a situation, however awful it was, that was fundamental in then making me feel that I was more resilient. And during lockdown, I've been in lockdown. I live alone, so I was a bit worried when it first started, because I thought, oh my goodness, and actually. It's kill or cure, I suppose. I mean, now I actually really, really enjoy my own company, which is lovely. And I've done lots of hobbies, developed lots of hobbies. Doing something creative always helps me if I'm feeling like I'm stuck in my head, I'm stuck in a low place. Go and create something. And I listen to lots of podcasts that talk about how to well-being and thought work and changing your attitudes to things, and I've also, like you, Gary, I've done an awful lot of work on myself, if you like, because as someone who has a history of anxiety and depression, I wanted to have a different sort of life. I didn't want that to be the way I was, and I was letting it define me. So I feel that I've kind of built up quite a sturdy internal toolkit now, so that I've got alternative narratives to the ones that perhaps I had when I was younger. And those help me greatly in this situation where, as you were saying earlier, Nick, it's the very definition of uncertainty and a lack of control. But I think you can always access a measure of peace within yourself if you can understand how to do that. And if you can take a moment to, as you were saying before we came on the call, take a breath and just, I will often say to myself, if I can feel my brain going crazy, it's like, okay, right in this very minute, I'm okay. And that's the only minute I actually have to deal with, is this minute. So I'm in it. So yeah, lockdown, in a way, it's not been that much different. I've been very fortunate in that I've got my lovely job at SCL, and SCL has kept going with the support of all its, wonderful members and community. So I haven't had to deal with that kind of stress. But yeah, I mean, this kind of work, I'm not sure I would have got through it as well without it. So, I would strongly advocate that people do this kind of work, because I think it's not weakness. It's about, as you said earlier, Gary, freedom. And I think what you said earlier about when you feel yourself being challenged, you feel, oh, it's an opportunity to figure out what's going on, so that you can kind of like break down even more barriers, if you like, to living the kind of the way that you want to live and being the person that you want to be. And it can sound a bit woo-woo, but I think it's fundamental.
I think it's pivotal. It's fundamental. Like when you really start on the actual work of this, it's, you know, fundamentally we create these constructs from, you know, our younger years where we develop these beliefs, and we create these kind of prison cells where we lock ourselves in, and they're fundamentally not true. So, you know, the main aspect of my work is really listening into what people are saying about themselves and life, and figuring out where they're imprisoning themselves in their own mind. And, you know, what we always generally find is that, you know, they're not true, but from our perspective, they feel very true. And, you know, another thing that you said is choice. Yeah, the ability to actually recognize the fact that when it really hits home, and to anyone that's listening to this, when you discover the fact that you do have a choice, yeah. Now, at the time, you know, you don't feel like you have the choice. So there's just a lot of love and compassion, as poetic and corny as that sounds. Like, you can only be aware of what you know. I can't go to Australia if I don't know it exists. I actually can't go to Australia anyway. But segue. What I'm saying is that, so now that once you become aware that you do have a choice, you can then make different decisions. And that is not easy. It sounds super simple, but it ain't easy. I get it. Yeah. It takes a lot of will and commitment. But the one thing that I always like to point out to people is, like, if you are in a state of dis-ease, if you are feeling stressed, depressed, low down, you know, angry, whatever, all those low vibe energies, if you're in that kind of place, what you can conclusively prove is that you've created a model of the world that gives that kind of reflection. So if you can create that, then you can also escape that. So with that comes a tremendous amount of freedom, but to do that, that is a looking within, because you can only change your perception and your perspective on the inside. Because if you're playing the game of going around trying to control circumstances and people to be a certain way or to agree with you, good luck with that. Yeah, because there's always going to be a circumstance or person that is going to reveal where you're not free within yourself. So that's why I said, you know, every time I get triggered by something, I laugh, because, you know, I have to, and I love it. It sounds so weird, I'm sure, to anyone listening. It wasn't always the case. You know, at first it was pretty freaking painful. But with practice, with, you know, developing that deeper relationship with yourself, you will find that freedom.
We've got a couple more questions have come in, and this one sort of relates to what we've been talking about. So how do you identify what true presence in the moment is? If you know that you're not in the present, how do you bring yourself back to it?
If you truly are in the present, you wouldn't be asking that question, and you wouldn't feel the need to identify it. Gary, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, of course.
It's quite a tricky one.
No, it's an amazing question, and just to, you know, to give the best kind of feedback, Maddie, could you just repeat it one more time?
Yeah, sure. How do you identify what true presence in the moment is? If you know you're not in the present, how do you bring yourself back to it?
Beautiful. Okay, so therein lie, you know, obviously within the question is obviously normally the problem. But the way I like to describe it, and hopefully this will make sense, whoever sent it in, thank you for the question, it's awesome, is generally we have different modes, different ways of being, or I prefer modes. So we have the conscious mode, think of it like that, where you're fully in the present moment. You are experiencing everything through your 5 senses. So I always miss one out. So taste, touch, sight, smell. God, I did miss another one out. Got a 5th one in there, trust me. But anyway, so you're perceiving your reality through your 5 senses. You are fully engaged. It's like, I've got this glass of gin, I mean water, and it's, you know, I can feel the texture of the glass. I'm like fully can be immersive in the experience. I can taste what the water feels like. I can feel it as it travels down into my body. That's enough detail. But it's like I am fully engaged. I'm fully present. So that's like I'm conscious, in the conscious mode, observing the outer world. Now, on the flip side, we as humans have a prefrontal lobe, prefrontal cortex, which allows us to self-observe. So I am able to observe my mind as I am almost sat back in the couch, like watching a TV program. I can see what's coming up on the screen. Yeah, it's only when I'm present in the moment, as in present in my mind, that I can observe the content of it. So that's full presence. Then we have the flip side of that, which I call the unconscious mode, which is where you're sleepwalking through life. And this is where you are going off your autopilot system. So you go and make breakfast, you have what you have every single day, you use the same plates, you have your same coffee that you made in the exact same way, and you prepped it completely subconsciously because you haven't actually reconciled, even though you just finished eating it, what it even tasted like, because you was thinking about the meeting or the call or where you had to get the kids to. So you wasn't present. Yeah, you were functioning off your subconscious habits. Yeah, you were going off your programming. You wasn't actually there. So the difference between the two is what I call the takeover. And I'm almost at the end and I'll stop talking soon. But we have this takeover moment, which is where our attention is sliding so fast in between the present moment and our mind. But 95% of the day, give or take a few percent, depends where you do your research, you're in your head a lot. Yeah, 95% of the day, let's say you are working off your subconscious, patterns all day long. So that means you're sleepwalking most of the day, which is a bit concerning. But hey, we wonder why we self-sabotage all day long. So to come back to your question, the moment that you can observe your mind, you're present. If you're lost in it, then until you get that glimpse, like I said, it's like shutter speed. You'll get a glimpse where, maybe you'll spill something, or maybe the car braked a little bit quick in front of you. You're then fully in the present moment, and that's the point where you catch it. Now, the tricky thing is, if you're not, versed, or you've not been conditioned, which I definitely wasn't, but it's like I said at the start, it's my master skill. Once you learn to observe your mind and embrace the present moment, then you get the ability, the skill to be able to step out of your subconscious mind and your sleepwalking routine more. So it comes with a caveat, because we do not have the ability, as far as I'm concerned, there's very few beings probably in the world, maybe, monks meditating, that are able to be conscious all day long. So the game really is not about not getting hooked. It's about how long you stay hooked in the unconscious world of your thoughts that will determine the quality of your life. So that's why the ability to become present in the present moment, to really engage in that skill, is so paramount. Because I could put every single one of you in front of me right now, and I could say, hey, right now, right this second, as you look at me on the screen, do you have any problems? Like right in this very second, yes or no? Yeah. Right now, you don't. You're watching the screen. It's only when you start thinking about what's going to happen that you start getting into a challenge. So there's never really a danger in the present moment. That's why it's so powerful. It's such a great doorway. So, and just a little bit, and then I will shut up. But if something happens, guess what? You can deal with it in the present moment. That's the only time you can deal with it. But this is why anxiety really sucks, is because you're lost in your own thoughts about a problem that your mind made up, that's predicted in the future, that it's trying to solve. But it can't, because you've never been in your future. Uh-oh. So I hope that answered it. That's my best attempt anyway.
Yeah.
Can I just
go ahead, Nick?
go on, Maddie? Can I just add something quick to that? There's a really, really good book I'd like to recommend. It's by Michael Singer called The Untethered Soul. And he uses this analogy of being able to like look at a tree. If someone put a tree in front of you, you don't actually look at the tree. You think about all the associations you have with the tree. You think about what kind of tree it is. You put tree as a label onto that tree. You look at the surroundings. You create distance between you and the tree. And once you start thinking about that, you start thinking about the things associated with it. But very few people actually look deeply and intensely at that tree. And one of the ways to sharpen this ability to focus, as we talk about in the blog, is meditation. It's just a good way to practice recognizing these thoughts and bringing it to the present moment. Okay, I'm done.
That actually leads very beautifully into this next question that we've had. Do you believe that mindfulness or meditation can not only reduce stress, but also help unlock more creativity and new ideas from your subconscious mind?
Yes. It's scientifically proven. There's numerous studies done on this very subject. Just Google it. You can find so many studies.
I think, to expand on, this is why I love these conversations with Nick, because as you've probably noticed, I talk in a lot of detail, whereas Nick's very succinct. And I love his ability to do that. He's incredible. And the way I kind of like to hold it with regards to mindfulness, mindset, with regards to creativity, is that, firstly, like Nick said, you can look it up. It's, scientifically proven for the left brainers. But let's look at like a sports star. And I'm blessed that I get to help people on their mental side with their game, whether it's golf, tennis, whatever. But you see, when people come into a high pressure situation, the ones that really succeed are the ones that can manage their mind, because they didn't lose their ability to play in like 10 seconds. So it's the mindset thing that's controlling, their ability to perform. So same goes with singers or, any kind of performer. If nerves get the better of them, therefore their performance is going to be affected. So it's your ability to handle that. So what we're talking about is when, mindfulness or any kind of practice of like bringing in awareness is actually bringing yourself back into a state of balance, into a state of homeostasis, where you're in, let's call it the parasympathetic mode rather than fight or flight, sympathetic. Okay, so if you're in fight or flight, from a biological, physiological standpoint, like your brain can't be logical. It is firing a thunderstorm. Yeah, it's like me going over to Portugal and shouting in Nick's ear, and telling him to really focus and concentrate, because there's so much noise. Yeah, it doesn't work. So therefore, with regards to creativity, once you can bring yourself back to peace, then what actually happens is you make space for those genius thoughts to show up, or for you, better said, to hear them. That's where genius thought actually comes from, rather than listening to the noise. So very succinctly, yes.
I like to see you try and get to Portugal, Gary. That would be an adventure right now.
Challenge. I can't say it on here. Maybe accepted. Great.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. See how many we can get to. This one has possibly, what we've just been talking about is one way of dealing with it. But do you have any tips on accepting things that you don't have any control over and being patient until you do have more control? Which I guess goes back to trying to stay in the present. Even if the present is uncomfortable, that goes back, I guess, to the resistance idea that, this is what it is. This is what the situation is. And your perception of it is what's causing the pain. because somebody else could look at that situation and think, well, this is great, this is fine, or just be neutral.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, what you said, totally on point. But really, it's again, it's within the question. So it's recognizing, what am I resisting? And why am I resisting it? Yeah, because the other thing, the other part to that question is that everything passes. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it will at the time, but if you think of it, every emotion that you've ever had has passed. Every thought, you know, that comes into your mind is temporary. It's like shutter speed again. It like comes in, you know, where's it go? We don't know. You know, if somebody does, email me. But it's like, it's firstly having a real acceptance of the fact that this is how it is. And now where can I go? What can I do? How can I reframe this? Because in essence, I'm resisting this, as in I'm saying, you know, if you're to watch your mind, I'm saying, no, I don't want this, or that should be different, or that should be how I want it to be. And the thing is, like, from our personality, from our ego standpoint, you know, we want our way all the time. So when we can't be with something, the opportunity for growth is to discover why you can't be with it. Because that is where your freedom is found. It's a weird way of saying it, I know. But I always ask that. It's one of my favorite questions for myself, you know, why can't I be with this? And then you get to, because everything is, it's all yours. Yeah, we try and blame and justify our judgments and blame on others, but really it's all yours, because guess what? It's your emotion too. So that's quite a stern answer, but you know, what I would say is have a bit of compassion for yourself, a bit of empathy. We are in a challenging experience, both globally, but always life is a constant opportunity for growth. And, you know, that is the rule set, unfortunately. So if you are going through something tough right now, know that it will pass, but you will find more freedom if you can find that peace within you as to, you know, why is it that I'm in such resistance to that? Does that make sense?
It does to me, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we've got another question here. Is there an introductory book any of us can recommend to introduce this person to psychology? Nothing too complicated, but a good intro. So I guess into this sort of topic. I'm just going to jump straight in, actually. It just popped straight into my head. Is something that I found very interesting, and actually talks about the brain, the way the brain works, and then how you can address it in a really interesting way, was The Chimp Paradox by Professor Steve Peters, who works with sports people and, well, all kinds of people to sort of help them deal with any kind of, you know, problems that they might be having in terms of performing, anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. But he really breaks it down brilliantly. So I would recommend that. And I'll let you speak.
Yeah, my suggestion, quite a short book, we recommended it in the blog, is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That very speaks to the present moment. That will be a good introduction. Then you could look online for different people that are speaking towards this subject. Someone I really like to listen to is a guy called Peter Crone, or someone that was my kind of entry level into this world was a guy called Peter Sage. I think I like a lot of Peters in my world. So yeah, I'm more of an audio guy. I'm more, you know, I like listening rather than reading, but you know, I love to read as well. So Power of Now is a great book for an introduction. I won't take the one that I think Nick's going to recommend. So Nick.
The Untethered. So yeah, I've already mentioned it once already. It's by Michael Singer. And then both of these authors, Eckhart Tolle and Michael Singer, have kind of sequel books. A New Earth is one of them. I've actually started reading it right here, and the surrender experiment as well. I've got one final one actually, just sort of as well. It's by Brené Brown, called Daring Greatly, and that's a fantastic book about being vulnerable.
I'd think as an absolute introduction before you read any kind of book is be open and willing to invalidate potentially the way you've thought your entire life. And that's quite a big thing to say. But like I said before, the way of thinking that we're kind of brought up to believe is going to bring us fulfillment is actually, it's a hamster in a wheel. So I would just, before you go into any of these books, it's just, you don't have to accept what Nick or me or Maddie's saying, but be open and willing to consider it. And then once you take it from, let's say, an intellectual level, put it into play. Because intellectual data does nothing. Yeah, because knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. So if you hear something that works, go try it out. What's the worst that can happen? Yeah, you might just upgrade your life. You might find a little bit of peace. But until you do, yeah, it doesn't matter what workshop you go on, it doesn't matter whose course you do, books you read, until you've actually put it into play and have just a little bit of trust that it could work, you're not going to change. So it comes with these are good things to read, but apply what you know. Don't just be passively entertained by it. Yeah, because it's like a gym instructor. We all know how to get fit generally. You know, there's only so many ways to do press-ups. To all my gym people, I'm joking. But it's only when you actually do what you know that you get a result. Yeah. So don't be passively entertained by this conversation. If it resonates, go full in. Yeah, you might just find a little bit more fulfillment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's, be curious and be compassionate with yourself. Compassion and curiosity, I think. But we are pretty much out of time, unfortunately. I love these chats. I could do this all day. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time and sharing your experiences and your expertise. And thank you, everybody that submitted a question and posted in the chat. I've tried to put as many of the books and podcasts and resources that we talked about into the chat. But what we will also do is use the wellbeing page on the SCL website as sort of a hub where you can find all of the recommendations and resources. I think that would be really helpful. And please do share with us. If you want to email us at hello@, or email me, maddie.southern@scl.org. Any kind of tips, questions, feedback, what you'd like to see from future sessions, that would be brilliant. And yes, I think that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. And I hope everybody stays safe and enjoys the rest of their day. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Take care.